Obina was a small village, quiet and peaceful, nestled in the hills of the Nwankwo Kingdom. The people there lived simple lives, farming, fetching water, and sitting together in the evenings to chat. Everybody knew everybody in Obina, and news traveled fast. If something happened to one person, by the next morning, the whole village would hear about it. But lately, fear had settled over the village. For some months now, young women were being found dead, one after the other. Nobody knew what was killing them, but one thing was always the same: the strange marks on their necks. They looked like snake bites, but nobody could say for sure. No one had ever seen a snake around the women when they died. It was as if the deaths were happening in secret, and that made it even more frightening. The village chief, Chief Chike, sent hunters into the bush to find the snake, but they came back empty-handed. The deaths didn't stop, and the fear only grew stronger. Mothers started warning their daughters not to move around at night, even in the daytime. Women no longer felt safe. The once lively village became quiet, and people didn't trust as easily as before. But there was one person who didn't seem to care about all the fear. His name was Emeka. If you asked any woman in Obina who the finest man in the village was, the answer was always Emeka. Tall, with a muscular body that showed all the hard work he did as a builder. His skin was smooth and dark, and his eyes shone as if he always knew something you didn't. His smile alone was enough to make a woman weak. Emeka had the kind of charm that made women forget their fears. When he walked through the village, the women would giggle and blush, hoping he would look their way, and when he did, it felt like the sun was shining only on them. Emeka knew how to use his looks and sweet words. It wasn't just his fine face, it was the way he spoke, the way he moved, and the way he always seemed to be in control. He could make a woman feel like the only person in the world. But behind all that charm and beauty, Emeka carried a dangerous secret. He didn't care about the fear in the village. He didn't worry about the deaths either. He went about his day as if all was well and good. Emeka knew he was handsome, and he didn't hide it. He walked around the village with confidence, his head held high, and his eyes always searching for his next catch. The women of Obina were drawn to him like ants to sugar. Whether at the village well, the market, or on the farm, as long as Emeka was nearby, the women couldn't take their eyes off him. But it wasn't just about his looks. Emeka had a way of talking that made any woman feel special. He knew the right things to say at the right time. His voice was deep and smooth, like the calm before a storm, and he always knew how to make a woman smile, even when she was feeling down. He didn't need to rush. Emeka took his time, slowly drawing them in, making them trust him, making them want him. If he wanted a woman, he would get her. All it took was one charming smile, a few sweet words, and before long, she was his. And once he had her, he would take her to his hut at the edge of the village, away from prying eyes. There, under the soft glow of the moon, Emeka would work his magic. He was gentle, patient, making each woman feel like she was the most important person in the world. But when the night grew darker, Emeka would always ask the same strange question. Do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake? The women never knew what to say. They would laugh, thinking it was a joke. But before they could answer, Emeka would whistle a soft, eerie sound that seemed to float in the air. The women would feel uneasy, like something was about to happen, and that's when it did. Something would shift in the room, and before they could react, they would feel a cold, smooth touch on their skin. A snake, dark and dangerous, would slither out from Emeka's trousers. The women always froze, their fear too strong to scream or run. The snake would wrap itself around them slowly, as if toying with its prey. Then with a quick strike, it would bite them on the neck. The bite was always the same, two sharp marks like fangs sinking deep into their skin. The venom would spread quickly. The women would gasp, their bodies shaking as the poison took hold. Within minutes, it was over. They were dead, and Emeka was left standing over their lifeless bodies, his face expressionless. By morning, the women's bodies would be found in the village square, cold and pale, with the strange bite marks on their necks. The villagers would gather around, shaking their heads, wondering what kind of snake could do such a thing. But no one ever suspected Emeka. He was too handsome, too charming, too perfect. Each time another woman died, the fear in the village grew, but Emeka didn't care. He continued his life as if nothing was happening. The women still blushed and giggled when he walked by, completely unaware of the danger that lurked beneath his good looks and sweet words. Life in Obinna went on, even with the fear hanging over the village. The women were more cautious, especially at night, but the daily routine of fetching water, farming, and trading continued. Every time a woman died, people would mourn, but nobody had any answers. The village chief, Chike, tried to keep the people calm, but deep down, everyone knew that something was wrong, and it wasn't just a normal snake causing these deaths. Then one day, a new face appeared in the village, a woman named Adaeze. She was different from the other women in Obinna, tall and graceful, with skin that shone like polished wood. Adaeze carried herself with confidence. Her beauty wasn't just in her face or body, but in the way she moved, as if she wasn't bothered by anything around her. She had come to visit her aunt, who lived on the edge of the village, and almost immediately she caught Emeka's attention. Emeka noticed Adaeze the first time he saw her at the well. Unlike the other women who couldn't help but stare at him or blush when he passed by, Adaeze didn't seem impressed. She didn't giggle, she didn't stare, she didn't even smile at him. Instead, she looked straight past him, her face calm, like she was in control of everything. This intrigued Emeka. He wasn't used to being ignored, and Adaeze's calmness felt like a challenge to him. He had always been able to win over any woman he wanted, and he wasn't about to let Adaeze be the first one to resist him. From that moment, Emeka decided that he had to have her. Emeka began to watch Adaeze more closely. He noticed that she was always polite, but never too friendly. She spoke kindly to people, but never allowed anyone to get too close to her. This only made Emeka want her more. He wasn't just interested in her beauty, he was fascinated by her mystery, by her strength. The more he watched her, the more determined he became. Emeka wasn't used to failing, and he wasn't about to start now. He began to follow Adaeze, looking for opportunities to speak with her, to charm her, like he had done with so many others. But each time he approached her, Adaeze kept her distance, as if she knew something that he didn't. One afternoon, Emeka found his chance. Adaeze was filling her water pot, and there were fewer people around. Emeka walked up to her, his usual confident smile on his face. "Adaeze," he said smoothly, his voice deep and sweet like honey, "let me help you carry that." Adaeze glanced at him, her face expressionless. She didn't look impressed by his looks or his charm, and this only made Emeka more eager. He waited for her to giggle or blush like the others, but instead, she simply nodded. "If you can assist," she said calmly, stepping back to let him take the pot. Emeka felt a small victory. He lifted the pot easily and placed it on his head, making sure to show off his strength. As they walked to her aunt's house, Emeka tried to make small talk, but Adaeze remained quiet. She answered his questions politely, but didn't give him any more than necessary. This wasn't what Emeka was used to, but he told himself it was only a matter of time before she fell for him. All the women eventually do. She is only playing hard to get. I just have to work a little harder with this one. After that day at the well, Emeka couldn't get Adaeze out of his mind. She wasn't like the other women of Obinna. Most of them would have melted under his smile, giggling and blushing, but not Adaeze. She was different. The more distant she remained, the more obsessed Emeka became. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to a woman not giving him the attention he was used to. It was new, it was frustrating, and it made him want her even more. Emeka had always been able to get any woman he wanted with little effort. Just a flash of his smile, a few smooth words, and the women of Obinna were his. They were all the same, soft, eager, easy to seduce. But Adaeze, she wasn't falling for any of his tricks. She seemed immune to his charm, and this drove Emeka crazy. Day after day, he watched her. When she fetched water, when she walked through the market, even when she visited the farm with her aunt. Adaeze carried herself with a quiet strength that made her stand out. She didn't seem to care about anyone's opinion, least of all Emeka. She lived her life peacefully, and that only made her more attractive to him. Emeka started finding excuses to talk to her. At first, it was little things, offering to help carry her load, trying to make small talk, trying to get her attention in any way he could. But no matter what he did, Adaeze stayed polite but distant. Her calmness was beginning to bother him. One evening, Emeka couldn't take it anymore. He decided that he needed to do more. He needed to take control of the situation. He couldn't let Adaeze continue to slip through his fingers. He had never failed with a woman before, and he wasn't about to start now. Emeka knew that Adaeze often visited her aunt's small farm just outside the village where they grew yams and vegetables, so he decided to wait for her there. It was a warm evening, and the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow over the fields. He leaned against a tree, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes focused on the path leading to the farm. Finally, he saw her. Adaeze was walking slowly, her steps steady and graceful. She was carrying a basket of yams on her head, her back straight, her face calm as usual. As she approached, Emeka stepped forward, blocking her path. "Adaeze," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "you've been avoiding me." Adaeze raised an eyebrow and looked up at him, not breaking her calm expression. "I've been doing no such thing, Emeka. I've just been busy," her response irritated him. Emeka wasn't used to being brushed off like this. He was used to women being excited to see him, not acting like he didn't matter. But he forced a smile, trying to keep his cool. "You're always so serious," he said, taking a step closer. "Why don't you let me walk with you? We could get to know each other better." Adaeze gave him a long look, her face still unreadable for a moment. Emeka thought she might actually agree, but then she shook her head, stepping around him. "I'm not interested, Emeka," she said simply. Emeka stood there, stunned. He wasn't sure if he was more shocked or angry. How could she just walk away from him like that? Nobody had ever said no to him like this. His pride felt bruised, but more than that, his obsession with Adaeze grew even stronger. He couldn't let her slip away so easily. No, she would be mine, no matter what it took. As Adaeze walked away, Emeka's eyes darkened. He made a promise to himself right there. He would have her, and she wouldn't be able to resist him for long. Emeka's frustration grew as Adaeze continued to resist him. He was used to women falling for him quickly, but Adaeze wasn't like the others. The more she ignored his advances, the more obsessed he became. He knew he had to change his approach to win her over. This time, he decided to be patient, to play the long game instead of showering her with attention like before. Emeka pulled back. He stopped following her around and barely spoke to her when they crossed paths. It didn't take long for Adaeze to notice the change. She had expected him to keep trying, but now he seemed distant, almost uninterested. The shift in Emeka's behavior worked. After days of watching him from a distance, Adaeze became curious. She approached him one evening as he sat outside his hut sharpening his tools. "You've been quiet lately," she remarked, her tone calm but curious. Emeka simply nodded, keeping his answers short and his face expressionless. He knew this would draw her in. After a few moments of silence, Emeka suggested a walk, and Adaeze agreed, her guard lowering slightly as they walked. Emeka kept the conversation light, just enough to keep her comfortable. He wanted her to believe that he was a changed man, and that he was more than the charming, attention-seeking womanizer she had assumed. And slowly, it seemed to work. Emeka had played his cards right, and now Adaeze's defenses were lowering. She no longer looked at him with suspicion, and her once guarded responses softened. Emeka could sense that the moment he had been waiting for was near. His patience had paid off. One evening, as the sun was setting over the village, Emeka decided it was time to act. He invited Adaeze to his hut, saying they could share a quiet evening together. Adaeze, now more comfortable around him, agreed. The air was still, and the village seemed almost too quiet as they made their way to his hut on the outskirts of Obinna. Inside, the flickering light from a small oil lamp cast soft shadows on the walls. Emeka offered her a seat and poured her some palm wine, his voice calm and soothing as they talked. Adaeze sipped the wine slowly, her eyes watching him carefully, but no longer with the sharpness of before. Emeka smiled inwardly, knowing that the moment was finally his. He moved closer, gently brushing his fingers against her hand, and began to speak in that low, seductive voice he was known for. "Adaeze," he said softly, "I've been thinking about you. You're different from the others, strong, independent." Adaeze smiled faintly, still relaxed, but Emeka could see the effect his words were having. He leaned in a little closer, his voice now almost a whisper. "Do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake?" Adaizi's brows furrowed slightly, confused by the sudden question. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, Emeka began to whistle. The sound was soft at first, barely noticeable, but it grew louder, filling the room with an eerie tune. Adaize shifted in her seat, suddenly uneasy, but it was too late. From the shadows, a dark shape began to stir. Adaizi's eyes widened as she saw it, a snake, long and menacing, slithering out from Emeka's trousers. The cold, smooth scales glistened in the dim light as the creature coiled around her. Emeka watched, his face expressionless, as the snake prepared to deliver its deadly bite. But something was different this time. Adaize, though terrified, suddenly reached into the folds of her wrapper and pulled out a small white flute. Without a moment's hesitation, she blew into it, and the sound that came out was sharp, piercing, and filled the air with a strange energy. Emeka's eyes widened in shock as the snake froze mid-strike. It hesitated, confused, its eyes now locked on Adaize. Instead of its usual prey, she blew the flute again, and this time, the snake slowly turned away from her and slithered back toward Emeka. Emeka stumbled back, fear flashing across his face for the first time. The snake, now under Adaize's control, coiled around him, tightening its grip. Emeka gasped, struggling for breath as the serpent constricted its fangs, hovering near his neck. How did you? Emeka stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Adaize's face was calm, her eyes cold and steady. "You're not the only one who knows how to control a snake. It's time you paid for your wicked acts. Also, remember to say hi to Nwando." Before Emeka could respond, the snake struck, sinking its fangs into his neck. The venom spread quickly, paralyzing him almost instantly. His body convulsed, his breathing shallow as the life drained out of him. Adaize stood over him, her expression unreadable, as Emeka's body went still. The snake loosened its grip and slithered away into the darkness, leaving Emeka lifeless on the floor. Long before Adaize ever set foot in Obinna, her heart was heavy with grief and anger. The reason she had come to the village wasn't just to visit her aunt, it was to find answers. A few months earlier, she had lost her closest friend, Nkechi, in one of the mysterious deaths that had shaken the nearby villages. The pain of losing Nkechi had cut deep, and Adaize had made a vow to herself that she would find the person responsible. Nkechi and Adaize had grown up together, inseparable since childhood. Nkechi was full of life, always laughing, always bright. They had shared everything, from their dreams to their deepest secrets. One evening, Nkechi had told Adaize she was seeing someone new, a man she described as tall, handsome, and charming, someone who made her feel like the only woman in the world. But Nkechi never mentioned his name. She only said that this new man had something mysterious about him, something she couldn't quite explain. 2 weeks later, Nkechi was found dead, her body lying in the village square, cold, pale, with strange bite marks on her neck, just like the others. The village mourned her loss, but no one had answers. Adaize was devastated, and her grief quickly turned to suspicion. Who was this man Nkechi had been seeing? Why hadn't she revealed his name? And why did no one know anything about him? Adaize couldn't let it go. She knew that her friend's death wasn't some random accident. It had to be connected to this mysterious man. Her instincts told her that something dark was at play. So she began asking questions, quietly, carefully. She wanted to know everything there was to know about the recent deaths, and soon enough, her search led her to Obinna. When Adaize arrived in Obinna and laid eyes on Emeka for the first time, she immediately suspected him. His looks, his charm, and the way he commanded attention. It all fit the description Nkechi had given. Emeka was the kind of man who could seduce any woman, and Adaize's instincts told her that he was hiding something. But Adaize knew she couldn't confront him directly. Emeka was too careful, too clever. If she wanted to get to the bottom of the mystery, she had to be patient. She had to play his game, make him think she was just another woman drawn to his charm. And so she allowed him to approach her, to believe he was slowly winning her over, but all the while, Adaize was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Before coming to Obinna, Adaize had sought the help of a powerful oracle in her home village. The deaths were too strange, too similar, to be the work of an ordinary snake. The oracle was known for seeing beyond the physical world, for uncovering hidden truths, and Adayze hoped she would have answers. The oracle had welcomed Adayze into her small hut, filled with the smell of burning herbs and thick with the energy of the unseen. Adayze explained everything: Nkechi's mysterious death, the bite marks, the strange man her friend had mentioned. The oracle listened in silence, her eyes closed as if she were seeing things far beyond the walls of her hut. Finally, the oracle opened her eyes and spoke. "There is a man," she said in a low, raspy voice, "whose manhood is not that of ordinary men. He carries a snake within him, a serpent of seduction and death. It is his weapon, his curse. With it, he lures women to his bed, and once they are under his spell, the snake strikes. The venom kills swiftly, leaving only the marks behind." Adayze felt a chill run through her. She had suspected something dark, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. A snake man able to charm women into their own deaths. It sounded impossible, but the deaths in Obina were too real, too frequent to ignore. "Is there any way to stop him?" Adayze asked, her voice steady despite the fear growing inside her. The oracle nodded slowly. "There is a way, but it is dangerous. You must use his weapon against him. The snake responds to a specific sound, a whistle that he uses to summon it. But with the right tool, you can control the snake. I will give you a flute, a sacred instrument that can protect you. If you play it at the right moment, the snake will obey you, not him." The oracle handed Adayze a small silver flute, no bigger than her hand. It looked simple, but Adayze could feel the power within it. This was her only chance. "But be warned," the oracle continued. "He is clever. He will try to seduce you, to make you trust him. You must let him believe that he has won. Only then can you strike with the flute in hand." With a plan forming in her mind, Adayze set off for Obina, ready to face the man she believed was behind her friend's death. From the moment she saw Emeka, she knew she was right. He fit the description perfectly. The charm, the arrogance, the way he seemed to draw women in like flies to honey. She had to be careful. She couldn't let him see her true intentions, so she played along, allowing him to think he was getting closer, that she was falling for him just like the others had. Little did Emeka know that Adayze was different. She wasn't just another victim. She was here for revenge, for justice, and with the oracle's flute, she had the power to make sure that Emeka paid for what he had done to Nkechi and to all the other women who had fallen under his deadly spell. By morning, the village of Obina was buzzing with whispers. The villagers gathered in the square, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. Emeka, the man they had all admired, lay lifeless in the middle of the square, his body pale and still. Beside him the snake, his deadly secret, coiled its head severed and lifeless. Adayze stood before the villagers, her face calm but her heart heavy. She had done what she came to do. She had avenged her friend, Nkechi, and brought an end to the terror that had haunted the women of Obina for so long. The village was silent as she spoke, her voice steady and clear. "I am not just an ordinary visitor," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I came here with a mission to find the man responsible for my friend Nkechi's death and to put an end to the killings. Emeka, with all his charm and good looks, was not what he seemed. He was the cause of all the deaths in this village. He used his snake manhood, hidden inside him, to seduce and kill women." The villagers were stunned. They had never suspected Emeka, the handsome, charming builder who seemed perfect in every way, of being the source of so much pain and misery. For years, he had lived among them, gaining their trust, all while hiding the dark truth behind his smile. They had been blinded by his charm, by his fine looks, never imagining that he was a monster in disguise. Murmurs of disbelief spread through the crowd. Some of the women who had once giggled and blushed in his presence now stood in silence, their faces pale with shock. Others bowed their heads in shame, realizing how close they had come to falling victim to his deadly seduction. But now the truth was clear. Emeka's reign of terror had come to an end, and the village was free from the darkness that had plagued it for so long. Years passed, and the story of Emeka and his snake manhood became a legend in Obina. Mothers would tell the tale to their daughters, warning them of the dangers of falling for a man's charm without knowing his heart. The tale of Emeka became a lesson for all, a reminder that not everything beautiful is good, and that sometimes danger hides behind the sweetest smile. Adaizi's name became one of honor throughout the Nwankwo kingdom. She was spoken of with reverence, her bravery and wisdom celebrated by the people. She had faced down a monster, outsmarted him, and saved countless women from suffering the same fate as her dear friend Nkechi. Her name was whispered with pride by the women of Obina, and her story was passed down from generation to generation. As for Emeka, his name was forgotten, buried in the dust of history. No one spoke of him anymore, except as a warning to those who might be tempted to use charm and deceit for evil. The villagers would remember the darkness he brought, but they would never honor his memory. The village of Obina thrived once again. The women were safe, the fear that had gripped the village for so long finally lifted, and life returned to normal. The people of Obina found peace, but the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The memory of what had happened remained a reminder of the strength and wisdom it took to uncover the truth and to protect those who were vulnerable.